Yeah, hi, this is Rusty. Sorry I'm late. My mom told me I was born late, but yeah, happy Tuesday, everybody. Um, Today I'm gonna maybe take a few questions and then focus on volume, which seems to be on everybody's minds these days. But I got a few questions. Uh, Can you please compare and contrast the smoothie and the Zeppelin? Uh, sure, the Zeppelin is designed as a big boy's small wave cruiser. It's got relatively low rocker, a lot of width, and a fair amount of thickness. The smoothie was uh, developed off of an older model. I had this friend that loved the catfish. It was a double wing swallowtail with a little bit fuller nose. And he wanted to, you know, he didn't really want the round tail on his next board, but I thought, well, let me try it because he's pretty open-minded, and it ended up being his favorite board, and it's been a top seller in our line for 10 years, I guess, close, or maybe 8 years.
Close to 10
years. Yeah. And yeah, it's a top seller. The Zeppelin, we get a few orders for. And I've actually modified it over the years. I've added a little bit more rocker to it. Denise Pierce, what advice would you give to someone who wants to start shaping surfboards? Do it because you want to. Not because you think you're gonna get rich or anything like that, but it's something I've enjoyed since the first board, and it's been my passion. And I was fortunate enough to have a popular logo that turned into a great clothing line for a few years. But I still shape every day. I shape 4, 5, 6 boards every day. So yeah, do it because you want to do it, and I hope you enjoy it. Dave Cannell, if you want to recommend 3 boards for Quiver, which ones would you recommend? It all depends on what your likes are when you surf. I mean, what type of waves you're after. If you're a younger guy, I'd say, get a fish, one of our fishes, get a performance shortboard, and then get a step-up board like a Blackbird or a Slayer 2. If you're an older guy, once again, I think a fish is great. I mean, the Dwart is basically a fish. It's a double wing roundtail. And then we have some kind of classic fishes, and then we have some variations of the fish with slightly narrower noses and slightly pulled in tails with flat decks and angular rails. And a lot of people are trying those these days, and a lot of people are really liking them. So yeah, for an older guy, I'd say one of the fishes, and then maybe a little bit bigger, maybe not a high performance shortboard, but something like the smoothie maybe. You still get performance out of it, but you're not really, busting airs or anything like that. And then a bigger step-up board, one of the step-ups we have. The Slayer 1 is kind of a specialized board. I built it for Josh Kerr 8 or 10 years ago. And it's designed for a slabby type wave. You take off a very steep wave and you pull up and in, and you're driving off your front foot. And that's why I move the width forward and have a straighter outline in the back half and some decent tail rocker in it. The Slayer 2 is a little bit more balanced step up. I just pulled the wide point back a little bit on the Slayer and gave it a more conventional rocker, some plus rocker in the tail. I think I've always tended to shape with relaxed rocker. Sorry, I'm jumping, Dave, but I've always tended to shape with a little bit more relaxed rocker. I felt like when the Emperor had his new clothes on in the early '90s, the rocker was ridiculous, and Pat O'Connell a few months ago asked for a remake of his Endless Summer board, and I looked up the files, and it was a 5.9 or 5.10, and he had almost 6 inches of nose rocker in it. I don't put 6 inches of nose rocker in a 7.6 gun these days. The nose rocker, the entry rocker is important, but I think a lot of people overdo it. In my mind, the back half of the board is a business end, and I feel like I still use a fair amount of rocker in the back ends of most of my boards, except for the hot dog boards and the grovelers. Colum, what is the history behind the name? I did on April 19th. That's it. The names are so hard sometimes. I mean, there's so many shapers these days with so many models. If you Google it, you get overwhelmed. And so I think not only me, but I think a lot of shapers these days are just throwing ridiculous names out there. And, if the board works, then great. If it doesn't, but the names, the 419 Fish, I'd been testing it for a while. I finalized it on the 19th of April. What else have we got? What is kind of segue the volume a little bit? What's a good short board that has a lot of volume? Well, the key component in volume is thickness. If you read my blog on our website, I talk about what a half inch of extra length adds in volume, and it adds like 0.2 of a liter. So if you want a 6.0 and you're wondering if you should get a 6.1, you're only going to get a couple tenths of a liter. If you add width, you a 1/4 inch of width, you get less than 0.2. But if you add a fair bit of width, and you have an even foil, because most boards these days go thin, thick, thin, and that's another thing, is I've always been a fan of a very balanced foil. And there's a lot of people that make good, grovelers, and so if you're looking for one, look for a board with fairly low rocker, fairly even foil, and a little bit fuller outline. And if you really want more of a performance board, just the way that they're designed, you're looking at lower volume. And on the volume charts, somebody that weighs 155 pounds, an excellent to advanced surfer would probably like 25.5 to 25.8. So a good shortboard with lots of volume is kind of a nebulous question. But I think you get the idea. It's like the fishes, they're wider, they're flatter, they have more even foil. They have a fair bit of volume, but the high performance shortboards are much curvier in the outline, a lot narrower, a lot thinner, and a lot more rocker. Make a bat tail. Tyler 27, make a bat tail. And Sydney went, yep, you're on the list, Tyler.
It's a good one. Rusty, what's the difference between an 84 and the Blade?
Okay, I'll get to that in a second. But I just want to bat tail. The first bat tail I did was like 81, I think 81, and we had a cool bat as a logo, and it was a cool bat. It wasn't a bad bat. That kind. I don't want to go into it, but the difference between the 84 and the Blade is the 84 is true to the boards I was shaping for a lot of great surfers in the early 80s, and I shaped one for Aki in the summer of '83, and he was on his way. He was surfing in the contest here in Ocean Beach, and I was judging, and I saw he was 16. I saw his potential, but he was catching rails and whatnot. But he had insane power and great moves. So I shaped him a board, and he was on his way to Africa, and he said, "I'll pick it up when I come back for the Huntington Beach contest." And he got here for the Huntington Beach contest, and he didn't feel comfortable riding it, but he took it home. And the first time he rode it, he freaked, and he won the Pepsi Pro Junior. And then the next contest was the Murray Pro in Japan, and he rode it all through the contest until he broke the front 18 inches off of it, and he kept riding the broken board and got through a couple more heats, and I think he finished equal third in that contest. So yeah, the 84 is true to that board from that period with boxy, flat deck, boxy, angular rails, a beak. The Blade is more of an update. The one thing the two have in common is the flat deck and the angular rails. The Blade doesn't have a beak, and it's got a bit more tail rocker in it and a bit more nose rocker than the 84. And the Blade has been popular. I think if you make your boxy rails right, they're not boxy, but the volume carries out towards the edge of farther out. It carries out towards the edge of the outline, and how do I do that? The rail is kind of a lower apex, and then it's kind of got a straightness to it rather than a curve. And that straightness takes out the volume in the lower part of the rail above the apex, and so it actually helps you set your rail. And then it goes up to the top, and it's pretty angular. If you did them right, the boards work insane. They were easy enough to set the rail for turns, but they come out of a turn quicker and freer and looser. And, a lot of people rode them for a while, so that's why we brought it. I did a revised version of the 84, and we did a promo with Aki a few years ago. We had 100 limited editions made, and some people rode them, some hung them on their walls. And then a couple of years ago, I started experimenting with modernizing the 84, and thus the Blade. And then now we have the series, the Shiv, the Hatchet, and the 419 all have flat. Yeah, Stretch gets a lot of credit for helping to popularize them. He wasn't the first. I experimented with a few in the 80s. I had Greg Mungo glassing for me. Was it almost 20 years ago, 15 to 20 years ago, and he experimented. We did rail grooves on guns, and we also did grooves with fiberglass rope, or carbon fibers in the grooves, and there to add strength. The primary reason I think is to add. There's two reasons. To add strength to the board, linear strength, which the compromise is it takes away a little bit of the flex, and it also lets you grip, gives you a little bit more grip on the rails when you're getting up or when you're duck diving. Let's see here.
This guy asked me how much harder is EPS.
How much?
That's a good one.
Ignacio, how much harder is it to shape an EPS than PU? And how do you feel about future technologies, and where is it going for the brand? Eco-friendly. Well, the first part of the question is, when I first started shaping EPS, the beads were a lot looser, and we'd have problems with the tools catching, the planer tearing, Surforms catching, sanding paper with beads popping out, and it was kind of frustrating because I was always used to making a very fine finish on the boards, and it kind of felt like it was hard to get detail. And I made my first EPS boards for a contest, an inland water contest, the first APS one, 1987, I think it was. And Robbie Bain asked me to make him one, and the foam wasn't that available back then. Well, it was for the building industry, but not for the surfboard industry. And anyways, we made him one, and we made a few more. There was a guy up in Santa Barbara. Sorry, I'm blanking on his name, but he was kind of the one of the pioneers of styrofoam. And about 20 years ago, a fellow from Peru came up with the extruded styrofoam.
Yeah.
What was his name? Pedro Vasquez.
Vasquez. Yeah.
And I liked it. The first blanks were they tinted blue? They were tinted blue. And I mean, what he had done is he had taken the styrofoam from the building industry. The blue foam was a waterproof foam, and it was a higher density foam. But he hot wired them into surfboard blanks, and he brought a bunch up. And unfortunately, the biggest blank was 7 foot. So I'm a big guy. So it would have been really hard for me to ride a 7-foot board, even 20 years ago. But that foam was a little bit easier to shape, and I think the end product was great. And that's evolved into the XTR boards that are being made, and we have our torsion springs, which leads to your eco question. I think that the torsion springs are probably the most eco-friendly, would you say?
Yeah, because they're recycled.
Yeah. And the foam, we've sourced white foam, and I know Patagonia uses, I think they use all extruded foam. And I mean, I'm pushing, I haven't made the decree, but I've been pushing the last couple of years for e-poly boards, polyurethane cores, and epoxy glass jobs. The epoxy glass jobs are definitely a lot more eco-friendly, and the resins that are being developed are constantly getting whiter, clearer, stronger. They last longer. But I think it's a matter of time before, if we haven't changed, we're going to be forced to change to epoxy glassing. On the site, it says the Mi Amigo is an old foil revisited. Can you expound on that? Is the tail thicker than a standard high-performance shortboard, or just flatter? That's a good question. The Mi Amigo does have a thicker tail block. It's an 1/8 to 3/16 thicker than a comparable performance shortboard. The tail's a little bit wider. The tail block is a little bit wider. And it's got modern rocker. Like a 6.1 would have 2.25 in the tail and 4.5 or 4.6 in the nose. and it was moderately successful. Not sure why it wasn't more, but we've got quite a few performance shortboards. But yeah, it's a great board. It's definitely not flat. It's got good.
That's a good question.
I was starting to get into I got a couple of volume questions here. For us bigger guys on 215, do you recommend sticking with standard guild factor volume ranges, or do you think the scales is different? That's a perfect question to lead into my main topic tonight. Is there's guys. Wade Carmichael weighs 190 pounds and he rides 31.31 liters. But he rides a 5'11" or 6-foot board. But as you get older, the older guys know your reflexes slow down and you get heavier and you get less muscle and you get more bustle or something. But, yeah, the volume charts are there for guidance. They're not gospel, and that really bugs the shit out of me, because for the last 20 years, since the computers that more and more people have been using computers to design their boards, more and more people have put up volume charts, and for smaller boards, in my blog, I showed. I don't have beer. This is water. That, folks, is a half a liter. And if you can tell me you can feel the difference of a half a liter on your board, then you better be on a tour. But back to your question about bigger guys, yeah, I think it's a different scale. The bigger you get, the older you get, the more volume you need. And what's the point of surfing if you're not having fun? If you're 45 years old and you weigh 215 and you're still trying to ride a 6'3", you're not having fun. Well, you might be having fun, but you're struggling. You're struggling catching waves. You're struggling making waves. And why not make it as you get older and bigger, gracefully, more volume, really. I would, my son is 6'3" and 215 pounds, and he's a great surfer, but he prefers volume in the high 30s and the low 40s. That's the minimum volume that he rides, which is kind of more than the charts. And so I would say, pick a shaper that you trust, and if you trust them, don't argue with them about the volume. I can do a board for you without any information or very little information, but I have a profile on our website, or I will send you a profile. It's a handful of questions about your age, your height, your weight, how long you've been surfing, what kind of board are you coming off of. And more often than not, I'll get somebody coming off an 8-foot softboard and they're ready to tear it up on a 6-foot high-performance shortboard. And time and time again, I have to stop them. I say, trust me, I've been doing this for 50 years. If you're a new surfer and you want to come off of a bigger board, don't take more than 6 inches at a time. If you can take a foot, you go from 8 foot to 7 foot, and sure, you can ride it, but you probably won't catch as many waves. You probably at first will have a hard time making waves. Come off an 8-foot board to a 7.6 that's still fairly wide and kind of thick. You're making reasonable progression, and it's progression that you'll be able to handle a lot better than if you take a foot, or like this one order I had the other day, got one to go literally from an 8-foot softboard to a 6-foot. Yes, thanks. And I after I talked to him several times, I got him to get like a 7-foot smoothie, and when he gets it and rides it, I think he'll thank me. Oh no, I need a surfing board, boss. Any donation? Yep, get in line. You'd be surprised how many people. I think some of them are serious, but how many people ask me that question? Yeah, it was. Surfed. We surfed together in macaronis in 2001. Those are the good old days. I have such great memories of Indo. I think I took my first trip in '99, and there were no camps, and your boat was the only boat. And it was pretty darn cool. It's a high performance model. It's Big Wave Dave. Tyler, 27. Again, please. Yes, please.
Any words of wisdom?
No, it's just, yeah. You're in line, Tyler. Is it cheaper to get a board from the factory in San Diego as opposed to getting it in a store? That's another good question. Over the last few years, with the advent of Firewire and then JS and numerous other shapers getting their boards built in Asia, the boards cost them a couple $100, so they bring them over here and they maybe land at $250, and they're trying to sell them for top dollar. So they're giving the shops more margin, and it gives them more budget to do demo boards and demo days and things like that. And we've had the way, which I've looked at. I've built sample boards in a lot of different foreign countries, and some of them were pretty good. But we've always been a quality brand. Our prices have always been amongst the highest. But in the last few years, it's the shop owners, unfortunately, have gotten to a place where they only really, for the most part, take consignment boards. And I just decided I wasn't going to play that game. And so, we sold boards out of our shops, and there was a handful of good dealers that kept the boards for a while. We still have a handful, but for the most part, the last couple of years I've been focused on internet and direct-to-customer sales. And to tell you the truth, I find it much more rewarding to work one-on-one with a customer, irregardless of their ability level. I love helping out beginning surfers, and I've always made great surfers boards. But because of the transition I'm making to customer direct sales via our website, we've had sales over the last couple of years, seasonal sales or whatever, for a couple of months where we give $100 off, and that's helped build our client base. And then now with the COVID issue, we have an ongoing discount, and the price will start creeping up, but not as long as this virus is happening. And as I said, I shape every custom board. I design it. I have help shaping them, and I communicate via email. And if somebody really wants to talk to me, I work in the evenings because it's quiet and it's peaceful, and I can think. But if you really need to talk to me, I'll make time to talk to you. But the other issue with getting a board from the store, and this one has bothered me for a long time, is most of the salesmen in the stores, they might have a little bit of knowledge, but generally speaking, they have very little knowledge. They have, and they usually have a favorite company they work for, and that's usually the company that gives them a team deal or something like that. I went into a surf shop up in Huntington Beach that was a dealer. It was a solid dealer on Main Street. And I walked in, they greeted me and said, "Hi, how are you?" And I walked upstairs and I started looking at boards. And the salesman came up and started rapping to me. And I'm 6'4". I'm a big guy, well over 200 pounds. And he goes, "Well, here, let me show you this blah, blah, blah label." And he tried to sell me a 6'2", 18 and a half by 2.3 surfboard. I just went, I don't think I can paddle that thing. I don't think I can ride it. Maybe you have something bigger. And he goes, yeah, I got some 6'4s and some 6'6s. But, I mean, my point being is, and I'm, it's hard to gain a lot of knowledge about a particular brand, much less all the brands that you sell in your store. And there's a few salesmen that I know that have been on the job for years and years and years, and they have a pretty good grip on what are the design features and the pros and cons of certain boards. But that has really bothered me too. Come to me, I think I know enough to make you a good board. So
this guy's just some.
What is the best model for high performance surfing in all conditions? What is the best model for high performance surfing in all conditions?
Tough one.
Yeah. Although in the early '80s, when we're coming off twin fins, so there was some experimentation with quad fins, and the tri fins were, by late '81, '82, they were 90% of the boards being made. But there was still a lot of variety in interpretations of the boards, like length, width, thickness, rocker, and all that kind of stuff. In today's world, with the computer design, and that's a whole nother Instagram session I can have, is what's the difference or the pluses and the minuses. But with computer shaping, there's guys that I don't think have ever picked up a planer that make a pretty good product, but they're all very similar. As low as volume as you can possibly ride without not being able to catch waves or sinking. As much rocker as you can use without bogging. Most of the boards have pretty deep concaves. To me, a deep concave is anything deeper than 0.3. A moderately deep concave is a quarter. A medium concave is 0.18, 0.2, and a shallow concave is 0.1. So there's, in numbers wise, there's not a lot of difference, but in terms of how it looks and how it feels and how it rides, there's a big difference. Singles, and then there's people that like single to double. But if you went to a WSL contest, and you went kind of casually through all the surfers' boards and the racks, there's not much variation. And I think a lot of the guys that are in that average size range, like 150 to 175 pounds, a lot of them exchange boards and try each other's boards, and there's some guys that still ride exclusively one guy's boards, but that's rare. It's John, and I don't know who else, but for the most part, guys have their shapers in each country that they travel to. They take their main shapers boards, but they also get backup boards from like Wade Decoro in Hawaii, or just different. different shapers in different countries. What else?
There's a guy asking for a best board for a beginner.
Best board for a beginner?
What's the best board?
I
A new surfer.
I think if you're what's the best model for someone who has just started? Part of it depends on your size. I mean, if you're 150 pounds or so, you can probably have pretty good luck starting at an 8-foot board. If you're a tiny person, yeah, I still think if you're under 150 pounds, your first board. How much does she weigh?
I don't know.
Your first board. I seriously think if you start under 8 foot, like 7'6" would be the bottom limit, but that's for a very light person. And as you get bigger, you get towards 200 pounds. I think 8'6" and 9 foot, and make sure they're wide, like 22 minimum wide, and close to 3 inches or over 3 inches, and that will help you catch waves and start to develop some confidence in catching waves first, and then learning to angle, and then learning to turn a little bit. And I get people that say they're intermediate advanced surfers and they've been surfing for a year, and if their plans are to surf once a month the next year and become more advanced, and it's not going to happen. I mean, if you want to advance, you need to surf 3 times a week, I think, at least more, in a decent wave. But back to the question, yeah, I think an 8-foot board is a decent size, and if you're bigger, 8'6", 9 foot. They get the very basics down, and then they want to rush and get right on a shortboard, and it'll be a challenge. Well, Jaron Isham, are Rusty's hand-shaped or computer-shaped? I've been using a computer for 20 years, but I've hand-shaped 50,000 boards. So I've hand-shaped enough. And there's guys that are great hand-shapers out there. And I think that's hand-shaping is fine if you are doing less than 1,000 boards a year, maybe 500 boards a year. But when you're doing 4 or 5 boards a day, hand shape, start to finish, it takes a toll on your body. It does. I mean, most older shapers I know have had hips replaced. They've had tendonitis. They grin and bear it. But yeah, I'll get into more detail in another session. What's the difference in performance between a flat deck and a normal dome deck? Well, one thing I do when people ask me questions like, well, what if I do this? And I help them think through the question themselves. I go, well, take the design question to an extreme. Like, what would a really concave deck feel like, as opposed to a really dome deck? And I think you can answer those questions, but as things become closer and closer and closer to values, it still applies. But if you, should I get a 5.2 or should I get a 6.2? It's just, once again, you can kind of answer a lot of those questions yourself by taking things to an extreme and then winding them back down to norms. Yeah. Just about time. Maybe have 1 or 2 more questions. Sister brother is my friend. Jackie Tatum. Bring the clothing line back. TNC Surf is doing it. But that's it. Thank you for all of you that have watched, shared, had questions. And I'll see you next Tuesday. Take care.